I don't know why these procedures were done or how her mother was able to convince the doctors. Mind-boggling is the only way I can put her ability to manipulate people.
You always hear people saying that criminal defense attorneys have no conscience and they're liars and they're bad people because of who they defend, and I don't necessarily believe that's true. There's a lot of attorneys that are really good people and actually use the truth, but this is an example of one of those bad attorneys that are liars. He just didn't think that this information would ever go public. So I want to know, why? Why would he be willing to lie for Gypsy Rose Blanchard? And what did he expect to gain from doing so? Because if you pay attention, like, you can see he's still very much a part of her career right now. And that's pretty rare for especially a public defender to stick around in the way that they stay with somebody for that long. Usually if somebody has a public defender, they get sentenced and they get a new one and a different one, blah, blah, blah. But he's stuck with her. That's odd. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village of liars to elevate someone like Gypsy Rose Blanchard to the platform that she has.
When Gypsy Rose Blanchard stood in court, facing the consequences of her mother's tragic end, one person stood firmly by her side, her defense attorney, Mike Stanfield. But was he just a lawyer doing his job, or did he misunderstand a series of carefully crafted lies that reshape public perception? The deeper we look, the more unsettling it gets. Mike Stanfield was instrumental in securing Gypsy's plea deal. His argument that Gypsy was a victim trapped in a cycle of abuse at the hands of her mother, Didi Blanchard. He painted her as a helpless, manipulated, and with no other way out. And for a long time, the world believed him. But what if much of that we were told was carefully curated? What if some of it was outright false? Let's start with one of the most striking examples of misinformation, something that actually played out on camera in the HBO documentary Mommy, Dead and Dearest. In one scene, Mike is seen going over Gypsy's medical records with her father, Rod Blanchard, and stepmother, Christy. He reads out a specific doctor's note, stating that Didi claimed Gypsy had developmental delays. He then points out a part where Didi supposedly held her hands over Gypsy's ears, implying that she did so to prevent Gypsy from hearing her mother's lies to doctors.
Some medical record where Didi essentially lied to the doctor about something. Mentally, Gypsy is behind. She's at the level of a 7-year-old on mother's information. And this is something that you see almost across all of the records, is upon mother's information, upon history by mother. So she's talking to the doctor here, and she's talking about how she has mental and developmental delays, needs assistance. Apparently, while holding her hands over Gypsy's ears so as not to offend history of mental retardation, 7-year-old level per mom. And so this was the one time where a doctor actually put in the record that Didi's got her hands over Gypsy's ear.
The way he delivers this information is calculated, his tone, his choice of words, and the setting all added to the drama. It was a powerful moment, one that drove home the narrative of Didi being the villain and Gypsy the helpless victim. But here's the problem. The actual document tells a different story. The doctor's note Mike was reading from wasn't about deception. It simply stated that Didi covered Gypsy's ears so as not to offend her while mentioning she was clumsy. That's a far cry from what Mike suggested. He twisted that detail to make Didi's actions seem sinister when, in reality, the document itself didn't support the narrative. This wasn't an accidental misinterpretation. It was a strategic move. By emphasizing the imagery of Didi covering Gypsy's ears, Mike played into a larger narrative of manipulation and control. It painted a picture that aligned with the chaos he was building, but in reality, Didi's actions could have simply been a mother's instinct to protect her child from hurtful words, rather than a calculated effort to deceive medical professionals. What's even more alarming is that Rod and Christy, who were present in the moment, didn't challenge his interpretation. They had access to the same medical records. They could have easily clarified the context, but they remained silent. Why? Was it because they too had become invested in a version of events that best served Gypsy's legal defense? Or were they hesitant to contradict a legal strategy that was already working in their daughter's favor? Regardless of the reasoning, the end result was the same. The audience was led to believe a version of events that had been carefully curated, not necessarily truthful. And if this one detail was manipulated so easily, how many other facts were adjusted to fit the narrative that Gypsy and her legal team wanted the world to believe? Why does this matter? because Mike knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just representing his client in court, he was shaping a public perception that would influence her case. His influence extended beyond the courtroom and into public discourse, where he skillfully positioned Gypsy as the ultimate victim. This was more than just legal representation. It was a calculated effort to sway public opinion and ultimately the outcome of the case. And he wasn't alone in this effort. Rod and Christie, who had access to the same records, went along with it. Why? Because it benefited Gypsy. They knew the truth, yet they allowed the twisted version of it to be told. That makes them complicit in the deception. Their silence, or perhaps their willful participation, ensured that Gypsy's version of events remained unchallenged. Whether it was out of loyalty, guilt, or simply the desire to see Gypsy receive a lighter sentence, they played along. But at what cost?
Well, you always hear people saying that criminal defense attorneys have no conscience and they're liars and they're bad people because of who they defend, and I don't necessarily believe that's true. There's a lot of attorneys that are really good people and actually use the truth, but this is an example of one of those bad attorneys that are liars. He just didn't think that this information would ever go public. So I want to know, why? Why would he be willing to lie for Gypsy Rose Blanchard? And what did he expect to gain from doing so? Because if you pay attention, like, you can see he's still very much a part of her career right now. And that's pretty rare for especially a public defender to stick around in the way that they stay with somebody for that long. Usually if somebody has a public defender, they get sentenced and they get a new one and a different one, blah, blah, blah. But he's stuck with her. That's odd. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village of liars to elevate someone like Gypsy Rose Blanchard to the platform that she has.
Their support of this manipulated narrative means they not only failed to provide an accurate account of events but also helped perpetuate falsehoods that misled the public. And it didn't stop there. Another piece of evidence that was used to bolster Gypsy's claim of medical abuse was the suggestion that doctors were negligent in diagnosing her. Why didn't Mike ever file a medical malpractice suit against them? If so many unnecessary procedures were performed on Gypsy, wouldn't that be the logical next step? The reason he didn't is simple. A lawsuit would have led to deeper scrutiny of her medical history, scrutiny that could have unraveled the carefully curated narrative. Had the case been opened up to more investigation, there is a strong chance the inconsistencies would have come to light, forcing Gypsy and those supporting her to answer tough questions. Instead, they chose to let the legal case run its course without challenging the very system they claimed failed Gypsy in the first place. What's more troubling is that the entire strategy rested on the public's accepting these claims at face value. No one questioned why a lawyer who claimed his client had been a victim of medical abuse wouldn't go after the doctor's response. The lack of legal action against medical professionals should have been a red flag, yet it was brushed aside as the media and public rallied around Gypsy's story. The more we look at the omissions and strategic decisions made by Mike and those supporting Gypsy, the clearer it becomes that this case was never about seeking full transparency. It was about controlling the narrative. Take Dr. Bernardo Flasticine, for example. He was one of the few doctors who openly doubted Gypsy's medical condition. He even went on record in the Mommy Dead and Dearest documentary and the Lifetime series, stating that he suspected Gypsy didn't have muscular dystrophy or cerebral palsy. He claimed he checked with Louisiana doctors and found that her muscle biopsy was normal. Except that's not entirely true. The actual medical reports show that Gypsy's muscle biopsy did indicate abnormalities. The results pointed to type 2 muscle atrophy, meaning her muscle fibers were slightly irregular in size. That's not the same as completely normal. So why did Dr. Flasticine say otherwise? Was he misremembering? Or was he part of a larger effort to solidify the image of Gypsy as a victim of medical abuse?
For a person that has not walked for 9 years, she should have technically almost no muscles in her lower extremities. But she did have muscles that looked quite normal. And she was able to support her body weight. I remember her standing. So I had a big doubt about the whole thing from the beginning.
He says, since last seen, I managed to talk to one of her previous providers. She specifically remembers Gypsy Rose and mentioned that her previous neurologist clearly reported the fact that Gypsy does not have muscular dystrophy.
Dr. Flasterson's statement carried weight, as he was one of the few medical professionals willing to question Gypsy's condition at the time. However, his words were taken at face value without deeper scrutiny. If his claims had been thoroughly investigated, the medical records would have contradicted his assertions, raising serious doubts about his role in reinforcing Gypsy's narrative. His willingness to overlook the key details in the biopsy results suggests either a lapse in memory or a deliberate omission to fit the larger story being pushed. Even Gypsy herself has told conflicting stories. In an interview with Dr. Phil, she claimed that she later found out her muscle biopsy results were normal. Dr. Phil, without any documentation in front of him, he took her word for it, just as the public has done for years. But when you compare her statements with the actual medical records, the inconsistencies start to add up. Was Gypsy knowingly misrepresenting the truth, or had she been led to believe a version of events that served her defense? Either way, the gaps in her story, combined with the misleading statements from Dr. Flasterson, point to a broader manipulation of the facts to secure public sympathy and legal leniency. The more you look into this case, the more you start to wonder how much of Gypsy's story was truth and how much was a carefully orchestrated legal strategy. Mike Stanfield didn't just represent Gypsy in court. He helped construct a version of events that the media and the public readily accepted. But what about his role today? Even after securing Gypsy's plea deal, he remains heavily involved in her life. He attended her baby shower, her book signing, events that frankly would not expect a former public defender to be present at. This level of involvement raises significant questions about his ongoing influence in Gypsy's life and the true nature of their relationship. So what's his deal? Is he simply a lawyer or became personally invested in his client's life, unable to let go after such a high-profile case? Or is there something more? Is he staying close to Gypsy to ensure she never slips up and contradicts the narrative he built for her in court? Could it be that he is safeguarding the carefully woven story that shaped Gypsy's legal outcome, ensuring that no inconsistencies come to light? Or is he just making sure she remains loyal to the version of events that benefited her most? His continued presence in Gypsy's life also suggests a level of control, whether intentional or not. Is he keeping an eye on her to make sure she doesn't reveal too much? Does he fear that with more public attention, Gypsy might start speaking more freely about what really happened behind closed doors? Or is there an even bigger cover-up at play, one that extends beyond just a courtroom defense strategy? And most importantly, if he was willing to manipulate key facts to secure a plea deal for her, what other lies might still be lurking beneath the surface? If the public was so easily convinced by the crafted narrative, what else could have been buried to protect Gypsy's image? The case might be largely closed, but the lingering question suggests that the full truth is still out there, waiting to be uncovered. This case is far from closed, and the deeper you dig, the murkier it gets. What do you think? Did Mike Stanfield cross ethical lines to secure Gypsy's freedom? And what else could still be hidden? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated as we continue uncovering the truth behind the Gypsy Rose Blanchett case.